This is a draft of an introduction to a collection, an edited collection about first-year composition and teaching first-year composition. And my co-editor and I are collaborating on the introduction. We decided to each tell a story, and that we would meet and share our drafts, and then go from there. So this is, in essence, my story. What's interesting about Anne and me is that Anne is in the ascending trajectory of her career. I'm on the descending trajectory of my career. So we see ourselves as kind of complementary in that way. But see what you think about this tack that I've taken. I think it'll become clear what I'm trying to do in this piece. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a little too long. Anticipating retirement in a couple of years, I began to cull my considerably large collection of books, 4 bookcases full. Picking and choosing, though, was difficult. Putting some books in the to-go pile seems like abandoning old friends. I began my career as an English teacher in 1980. The first few years were difficult as I worked to learn the ropes of the day-to-day teacher. Early on, teaching writing emerged as especially challenging. Generally, students didn't like to write, and I was often frustrated by what I perceived as their lack of improvement and interest in becoming better writers. After all, I was making numerous comments on their writing, pointing out the weaknesses and the errors, yet they never seemed to get it, although a few students seemed naturals and happily composed in a seemingly effortless way. Now I realize that in those early years, I wasn't really teaching writing, I was assigning writing. It wasn't until I began an MED program in English that I began to learn how to teach writing through becoming familiar with researchers who are exploring the processes that writers engage in as they write. I read Janet Emmig's account of the composing processes of 12th graders and Donald Graves' study about second graders' writing processes. I found affirmation of my own messy writing process and Sandra Pearl's assertions about the recursive nature of writing, a conclusion she drew from her examination of 5 college-level writers as they wrote, after which she used a coding scheme to help her order and systemize what she had observed. I was introduced to Flower and Hayes' use of think-aloud protocols to devise a model of composing, one that was informed by the information processing branch of cognitive psychology and Nancy Summers' research on revision. My teaching of writing evolved as I progressed through my course of study, informed as it was by my reading of those early case study forays into the process of writing and my participation in discussions about these studies in my courses. After I earned my master's degree, I continued to read about composition and the teaching of writing as practitioners such as Nancy Atwell and Lucy Calkins published books that showed how to teach writing in ways that were informed by this early research. My students began to produce multiple drafts of pieces with opportunity to revise as needed. My scrupulous written comments on papers changed to verbal feedback delivered in quick conferences, and when possible, students wrote on topics that they themselves chose. About 7 years after earning a master's degree, I embarked on a journey to become a teacher-educator and began a doctoral program in rhetoric and linguistics that allowed for a concentration in composition studies. Old friends, Janet Emmig, Donald Graves, and Sandra Pearl were revisited. However, research had burgeoned, and there were new teacher scholars and researchers to meet, along with new ways to conduct research and new ways of thinking about research and composition. Carol Burke and Cotter pointed to the need to attend to the context in which writing is being done when studying writers and writing, while also advocating for naturalistic inquiry that could lead to a better understanding of the complexity of writing processes. And some theorists and researchers began to consider shortcomings of earlier research that had employed experimental design. Patricia Bazell, for example, categorized composition theorists into 2 groups: the inner-directed camp, those interested in writers' thinking processes divorced from social influences, and the outer-directed camp, those who direct their interest to the social processes that shape language learning, asserting that what might look like a cognitive difference between skilled and unskilled writers may instead be the result of, for example, unfamiliarity with academic kinds of writing. Bazell's point was corroborated by post-structuralist researchers who posited the notion of discourse communities, relating this concept to the difficulties college writing presents to inexperienced writers because they lack proficiency with the language of the academic community, a point made by David Bartholomew. I think I'll stop
You're going to stop there.
Yeah. So I continue, though, along the same lines, noting different research changes in research methodology, how I was evolving. And I just end by the last two paragraphs. By telling this story, I realized that I've witnessed and participated in 35 years of composition studies that represent a kind of revolution in thinking about writing and the teaching of writing, a revolution that has had significant effects on how writing is taught from kindergarten through college. Maxine Harrison, of course, termed the change in focus in the teaching of writing from product to process as a paradigm shift, and indeed it was, although the word shift perhaps does not capture the dramatic changes that resulted when Minna Shaughnessy decided to try to determine why underprepared college students wrote the way they did, or when Janet Emick decided to ask 12th graders what they did when they write. It is fitting, I think, that as my career begins a downward trajectory, that I'm contributing something to the field of composition studies. So I think I'm mostly interested in feedback about the whole way that I've approached, like telling a story based upon my witnessing from 1980 to today, great changes in the field of composition studies.
I like this a lot. You've captured 35 years of composition studies in a very elegant, narrative way. It is telling a story, and I like that approach to this. Your voice is very noticeable in this. It sounds very natural and fluid, and this is really nice writing, Joanne. I marked a couple places as lines that stood out to me as particularly nice. Putting some books in the to-go pile seems like abandoning old friends. I like that because, you know, those of us who've had books on our shelves for a long time have become attached to them, and some of them we've reached for over and over again, and they're hard to let go of. Even if the space is too full, they're hard to let go of. The line at the end of the second paragraph, now I realize that in those early years I wasn't really teaching writing, I was assigning writing. What a huge difference, and informed readers of this will know the difference between teaching writing and assigning writing, and will recognize themselves in that. I'm curious about something, it's not relevant to the writing, but where did you do your MED?
At IUP.
At IUP? Okay, was it in the English department?
It was. It was before the MATE program was in place. It was called an MED in English Education.
Oh, okay.
And it was then that I began to read relevant research. Yeah.
So you're in the heart of it. You're there shortly after it's being developed. Yeah. All right. I also marked another line that I liked. My scrupulous written comments on papers changed to verbal feedback delivered in quick conferences. That's the 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. I liked that line. And I think those were the end of the lines that I marked, but I liked a lot of this. Something bothered me at the end. The phrase downward trajectory. My career begins a downward trajectory. I don't like that phrase. You're trying to say that your career is drawn to a close. This sounds like you're spiraling into, I don't know, I don't like the word downward there. I think that's what I'm responding to. And I had a couple other questions for you. Because I'm recognizing the names, I kind of love you're talking about Graves and Emig and Pearl and so on. But you, on the first page, the paragraph where you mentioned Sandra Pearl, there's a lot more explanation about her work than there is about Graves or Emig, and I'm wondering why that is needed. And then the same thing happens on the second page with Pat Bizzell. There's a lot about her in relation to the others that you mentioned in that paragraph. I guess Carol Birkencotter is a little bit, there's more about Pat Bizzell than there is about Carol Birkencotter. I'm realizing how many of these are women.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm just struck by that.
Pearl, Carol Birkencotter,
Janet Emig, Pat Bizzell, Patricia Bizzell, Nancy Atwell,
Lucy Culkin.
Interesting, isn't it? Minna Shaughnessy. All of them except John Graves, Joanne. All of them except John
David
Graves.
Bartholomew.
Oh, David Bartholomew. Yeah.
Mentioned. Oh, and Linda Flowers and John Hayes.
But her name is always first on them.
That's true. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so I really like it.
I think what I was trying to do with providing more information is to show the methodology and how perhaps it had changed a bit at that point, although I don't know if it's necessary to include that there.
Are you looking at the Sandra Pearl example?
Yeah.
Are you saying her methodology had changed substantially from
I'm not
Graves?
sure. I'd have to go back and check that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
In which case it could go if it's not that different.
And Flower and Hayes, I mean, their methodology was different than anybody else's because aren't they the ones who developed the Think Aloud?
Yeah, they did.
And
it was very
what
much using
Pearl and
right. That's
Summers
true.
used.
Right. So maybe I need to better show the relationship among them.
Are you trying to do a sort of capsule history of composition studies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking that our collection really shows, I think, the changes in ways of approaching learning about how to better teach writing, and that we are trying to focus more on student needs.
Okay, then I'm going to suggest somebody else too, Alice Brand.
Okay.
She initiated the studies on affect.
Okay.
Which I think we're much more attentive to
So
now
that might be a
than
kind of
we
a
were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Alice Brand.
Okay. And I do talk
Does
about...
Don Murray need to be here somewhere? Or
I'm
does he not
sure.
initiate change as much as he writes about things that maybe Don Graves writes about?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.